Thanks for joining us. My name is Callum. I'm the host of Maritime Software Hub, the People podcast. I'm also the founder of Cordell Beaumont, which is a specialist digital search and recruitment agency that covers markets including the maritime, supply chain, and trade space. In this episode, I'm joined by Christoffer Svard, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Sea by Maritech. Christoffer has spent the majority of his career in the shipping technology space, and I've known Chris for around 7 or 8 years or so. He's an incredibly approachable and very knowledgeable guy. So we're going to run through his kind of career path, his trajectory through kind of the sales functions within certain digital shipping businesses. And we're going to talk a little bit about what he feels are real strong characteristics and traits that can help kind of people develop their career in sales and ultimately end up in a senior management or leadership type of function. So please do like the episode. Please subscribe to our channel. It really helps with our audience exposure. And thank you again for joining us. Enjoy. So hi, Chris. Thank you for joining us and coming on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
No, you're very welcome. I know you and I go back a few years, so it's great to catch up properly, and really looking forward to hearing your insights into what we're going to be discussing today, which is predominantly the role of a Chief Commercial Officer, and of course your journey into the space of digital shipping. So what I'd love to do before we start, if that's okay, if you could perhaps give us a good overview of your role now, who you are, and a little bit about your background, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So maybe what I'll do, Callum, is I'll start just giving you an introduction to myself. My name is Christoffer Svard, Swedish by origin, but been in London now for the past 6 years. Family, 2 children, and since coming here to London, I've worked for Sea, and my background and history has always been within shipping technology. So for the last 13 years, I've spent that time in various commercial roles within shipping technology companies. So even before the time where this was really a thing. So that's been a truly exciting journey.
Great. Well, I'm really good to see you kind of almost sort of very early days of the kind of pioneering phase of digitalization in shipping. So I'm sure you've had a great insight to see how things have developed over the years and of course accelerated more recently. So in your current role at the moment, do you want to give us a quick overview of what your position is and how long you've been in that role for?
Absolutely. So I think, as I said, Callum, I've been with the company now for about 6 years, and we go that far back as well. So it's been a good, fun time. My role at the moment is Chief Commercial Officer, which means that at Sea I oversee our commercial activities, which ranges all the way from our outreach sales through the whole sales process into the actual onboarding and later on the account management of our customers. So really what we view as the kind of 360-degree view of all our customer interactions.
Okay, brilliant. And maybe you can give a bit of an overview of how Sea help their clients. Obviously, I've got a little bit of an insight myself, but it'd be great for people that aren't too aware, if you can elaborate, that'd be really great.
Absolutely. So within Sea, what we do is that we focus on the pre-fixture and at-fixture side of the workflow for charterers, owners, and brokers. So in reality, what does that mean? It means that we developed solutions that help our customers sourcing the right information to help support decisions, all the way through actually introducing more and better efficiencies through the chartering process, until the end of concluding the fixture with a charter party and agreement done. And at that point, our journey stops and we interlink and we interact with other services.
Okay.
Really what our vision is to build what we call the intelligent marketplace for fixing freight. And that's the journey that we've been on for the last 6 years, starting off in various segments, but more focused in the last 2 years, where we've introduced what's probably the first platform that at scale had tackled the freight negotiation part of it, and starting with the iron ore space.
Yeah, no, I think it's been really great to see also the kind of collaborations that I see having over the last few years. I think Vesson, RightShip, and is it Setup recently? Is one of the most recent ones?
In what we do, we realize that we have to focus and we have to focus on our specialities and, what we're good at. And as part of that, of course, collaboration is an important part. And historically, maybe we've come from a position where we haven't seen that collaboration to the extent that we want to, which means that a lot of the companies within the industry have kept on replicating and doing the same things and maybe competing for the same thing. Whereas with a greater level of collaboration, we can actually, all of us, achieve more and focus much more on what is our core areas of expertise. So as part of this journey, it's been natural for us to work together with companies that are like-minded, work together with companies where we can see that we can deliver value to the industry and to the joint client base.
Yeah, and do you see that a bit of a continuing trend across the sort of the maritime software, the digital shipping space, is seeing more and more consolidation across either slightly smaller businesses or the larger businesses? I'm certainly seeing it, so it'd be interesting to hear from your point of view.
Absolutely, I think maybe particularly within the shipping technology space, we've come from a position where we've had a very fragmented landscape, and what that has meant for our customers is that they are equally stuck with a very fragmented process and workflow where they're operating in silos. So I think it's our responsibilities as vendors and as software providers to look at how can we actually provide a much more joined up experience, and how can we facilitate the workflows for our customers, and how can we ultimately deliver value. So as part of our strategy, 100% the partnerships and the collaboration with other companies is incredibly important, and I see that as a trend definitely across the industry.
Are you getting asked that from your client base, saying we're getting lots and lots of suppliers that can come and approach us and help us in different ways? We'd love it if you were partnering with this business so we can work with you and perhaps another company. Is that kind of need for collaboration driven from the end user, do you think, or is it more just from the suppliers themselves?
I actually think at least our approach to it is that it has to be driven by our customers, and it has to be driven by the end user, unless we can see an incredibly obvious synergy. And typically, as we said, our customers will use different softwares for different parts of the workflow. Yeah. And really what we want to enable is to deliver straight through processing of information and data to these customers. And I think what we're seeing as well, taking data points and data sources from across that workflow and actually being able to surface and use that data at the right point in time as well. So that will ultimately force us to introduce greater collaboration and interaction and APIs in order to enable that to happen.
Yeah, good. So hopefully lots of exciting opportunities for businesses, especially startups that are kind of looking for somebody perhaps to sort of align with, could create some new opportunities, I'm sure. Let's go back a little bit. So you mentioned, obviously you've been in the digital kind of the maritime technology space for a number of years now. How did you first initially hear about it or start your career in that space?
I think as for most people, and listening to previous episodes of this podcast, but also other maritime shipping podcasts, it was a bit of a banana skid for me. So I don't think that I've ever envisaged myself to go into shipping, and especially not the digital shipping space, which back then almost didn't exist. So the way that I was introduced to this was actually through a friend who back in the days was a shipbroker at a firm called SSY here in London. This was 2008 and happy days. Really shipping was booming, and This was the place to be. I did my final year at university and thought, you know what, this sounds like good fun. And I have to say I'm ever grateful for pursuing this career and this path. Obviously, as everyone knows, the bubble burst big time back in the end of 2008, and my friend then moved back to Sweden and started for a shipping software company where I had the opportunity to join. So really starting from the ground up, started working in support, and from there moving into to various roles.
So was that Chinsei, that business?
That's correct.
Oh,
that
I
is
see.
correct.
That makes sense. Great. Okay, good. Well, thank you for that overview. So before we get into sort of the main kind of topic of the discussion today, the role of a kind of CCO, I always like to ask our listeners a couple of questions just to sort of try and find out a little bit more about them on the personal side. So is there perhaps maybe two things you can kind of share that the majority of people won't know about you?
Absolutely. It's a great question as well, Callum. So I think one thing that has taught me a lot, and reflecting back at it, was that in younger years I did competitive swimming, and I think that is probably something that most people don't know, and I did that up until the age of 16. But looking back at it as well, I think it's helped, form who I am quite a lot, and also the competitiveness of it, but also the fact that you have to understand how to allocate scarce resources, endurance, which is things that I think that I carry with me into my professional career.
Great.
It's about the longevity of what you do.
And that competitive drive, I'm sure, that you had back then carries on with you into your everyday life, which is fascinating.
Absolutely. And, fantastic experience. Today, less competitive swimming, but when I relax nowadays, cooking is really a big passion of mine, and it's something that I really love doing. It's a way to really focus in on something, maybe do something that is completely different to my day-to-day work, and just really allows me to zoom out.
Do you have a signature dish or anything you particularly your speciality?
I would absolutely say that I think my spaghetti bolognese is probably my signature dish.
Brilliant. I think mine's the same, to be fair. That's about the stretch I go to. But I do the odd other meal, but not too often. So
Amazing. Good to hear, Callum.
Great. Good. Well, so let's dive into what we're going to talk about today. And that's really to try and help anybody perhaps that's maybe in kind of pursuing sales positions, commercial roles, and they've got their eye on kind of perhaps promotion one day, and they want to climb that ladder, perhaps go into like a commercial director role, a head of sales role, that type of thing, and they want to ultimately try and get into a C-suite position. So, in your words, you did explain it a little bit at the beginning of the topic. So I'm sorry to go over it again, but how would you sort of define the role of a chief commercial officer?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, as a chief commercial officer, what I do in my day-to-day is I'm responsible for our commercial activities. That means that, a lot of focus is being spent on looking at our strategic objectives as a business, looking at our revenue goals and targets, and ensure that the activities that we do within the sales team and the marketing side of the business aligns to that. So it means that there is a lot of coordination happening. It means that there is a lot of coaching of teams. It means that constant review of strategic account, target accounts, where do we need to be? So a lot of my time is spent on those activities. But then, of course, where I am as well, it's also ensuring that we enable cross-functional collaboration across the business. So how can we work as efficiently and effectively as possible? How do we ensure that we stay incredibly close to our customers as a business? How do we ensure that we're customer obsessed in everything that we do? So that we know that we're on the right track, we're doing the right things, which will ultimately, hopefully, lead us to success.
Okay. And do you think there was a point in your career where you jumped from either being the head of sales or in a certain role that got you up to that C-suite level? Did anything happen internally, or was it more of a case of kind of revenue generation, so you kind of got your reward? What do you think was the key factor?
I would say that, traditionally in sales organizations is, you promote the people who bring home the biggest checks. But in terms of in terms of how did this happen for me and how did I end up being a chief commercial officer, I think it was much more around, yes, a deep understanding of our customers, listening a lot, but also hopefully demonstrating the ability to build functional teams, efficient, effective teams, and ensuring that we build out the right foundation to enable that growth. So in my role today, compared to maybe 5-6 years ago, it's a huge difference, less focused on the biggest deals, but more focused around how do we enable us as a company, how do we enable our teams to perform at their best. But of course, for me personally as well, I think it's so important and in any business that you're staying close to the customer, that you have your finger on the pulse, you understand what's happening, you understand the trends within the industry, you understand and you listen to your customers. And I think that's maybe also an attribute looking back, that the sales role is a lot about listening, and from listening actually taking action and ensuring that you understand and you can act on that feedback and what you hear from your customers.
And on that point, do you think that in sales in the software space, you can succeed without having the industry knowledge? So I remember years ago us going to numerous events and hearing you talk to people. You're incredibly knowledgeable about the maritime space and the technology side. But if someone comes from outside of shipping and they've joined a SaaS business in the shipping space, do you think it's a real disadvantage for them, or do you think it can be kind of picked up and learnt relatively quickly?
I think it's a very interesting question, Callum, and something that I think we debate all the time when we look at, what is the ideal candidate look like? What is the ideal person that we want to employ into our business? And I think the conclusion that we've ended up at is it's all about the attitude and the mentality of the people that we bring into the business. Of course, when you firstly join a business and you know nothing about shipping, it's a real disadvantage. This is a very niche industry, and the barriers to entry are really, really high. And understanding the fundamentals and understanding the customers takes time. But I do believe that we can educate people with the right mindset to actually get to a point where you can have educated conversations with the customers. On the other hand, having that shipping knowledge, of course, gives you a bit of a head start, but it's not a guarantee for success selling software. And I think that's where you have to strike the balance. And I think the conclusion we've arrived at is that it's really about the person.
Okay, understood. And if we've done it ourselves. We've helped brokers transition into software sales within the maritime space and things, and some have been incredibly successful. But have you seen any kind of brokers, obviously internally or other businesses, that have made that shift over to the software sales? Has it been like a shock to them, kind of like the length of the software cycle? Do most of them seem to click quite well, or is it just complete sort of lottery really to see who fits well with it?
No, but I think it's interesting because there are a lot of similarities between broking and selling. I think maybe broking to a greater extent is more transactional driven, and yes, definitely, the time it can take to do a sale, and especially if you're talking, a big ticket sale, then of course that requires a much lengthier process, and it's much more about solution selling. But at the end of the day, we're trying to help customers, and whether that is as a broker or trying to sell software, it really isn't a big difference. I think it's just in the way that you apply that. So if you come more from a transactional broking background, yes, maybe it will be a shock to the system in terms of the processes. But on the other hand, if you've been a broker and you've done period business, you've tried to sell more structured solutions, then the way we operate is fairly similar.
Yeah, and I guess sale and purchase in particular, you're speaking to clients for literally years, waiting for markets to kind of go up and down and things for them to invest. So again, that relates quite closely. Okay, so I think just to sort of wrap things up, any kind of advice or tips? You've given a great insight into kind of what attributes that sort of C-suite individuals need to kind of get to the CCO level. But any kind of advice that you would just give that you feel for anybody that's trying to get into that position that you might be able to share?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about persistence to me, and dedication and passion. I think with the right level of motivation and passion, you will get far. Of course, you need to apply strategic thinking and understanding in order to be successful in the role. But I'm a true believer that if you are driven by passion, if you love what you do, and you deeply understand and you want to make a dent and make a change to an industry, then that will provide the motivation that will allow you to get on the journey to become successful. And I think as well, successful can mean many different things. I think in the beginning of your career, when you're more in a sales executive role, maybe moving into a head of sales role, it's very different. You're still very focused around the closing of deals and closing the biggest contracts, whereas the transition into maybe becoming a CCO, it's much more about thinking about the group, the business, how do we become successful as a team together, and learning that skill of also, negotiating between, the pros and cons, and encouraging better cross-functional collaboration as well.
Great. Well, I think that's extremely valuable, and I'm sure our audience will really think so too. So, thank you so much for joining us, and it's a pleasure to sort of catch up with you again properly. And I think for now, what we'll do is we'll obviously share the content and everything, and look forward to receiving the comments. But for anybody that might want to kind of have any follow-up questions or might like to get in touch with you, is the best way to reach you on LinkedIn or via email?
Absolutely. I would encourage anyone who wants to have a chat to reach out on LinkedIn, and we'll share. And of course, email as well, which is christoffer.svard@c.live, and that's Christoffer with 2 Fs, just to confuse everyone.
Good. No, well, I've just about got it nailed now.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Really great to see you again, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you very much, Callum, and thank you for inviting me. Pleasure speaking to you.
And you.